Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this equity committee. It's February the 5th of 2024. We will start by the approval of the meeting of minutes. Has anyone read the meeting and have any questions on the minutes for the meeting, the last meeting on October the 30th? Going once, going twice? No. All right. If there's no question, we will go ahead and take a motion to approve the minutes, if that's okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
It's been moved.
I can second it.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes. All right, ayes have it. Let's move on. Mrs. Chapman.
It's approved. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. So for those of you who weren't able to attend our meeting in October, and I believe Mrs. Monar was there, I introduced the idea, which also came from Mrs. Autry and who was the other? Mr. Perry, who were a part of the equity committee this last year, and it was to introduce to the committee topics that we cover in our training session, giving you just a little bit of what we share with our staff when we go out. I'll just remind you that our foundational equity session is 6 hours, so we give you 3 or 4 minutes in this meeting of a very specific topic. So Sydney's going to bring it up, I hope. If not, you have handouts that I'm going to share. We wanted to project them on the screen. No? Not going to work? Okay, so I'm going to draw your attention to the dimensions of diversity wheel. And you all will remember from back in October, I introduced this as the foundation for starting all sessions in our district. We ground all of our work in deep understanding of identity and how those identities are experienced in terms of diversity in perspectives, in knowledge, and culture, and understanding, how we interact with our scholars, with our colleagues, with our family and community, based on what we understand about the identities that we can all hold. If you flip that over, you will see the latest version of that wheel. We have added at the base of that values, assumptions, beliefs, and power. Because as we interact with folks across multiple identities, we understand that these are the things that come into play when we are having discussions about the experiences of others different from ourselves. We're often drawing on our values, our assumptions, our beliefs, and our power. That's okay, Sydney. You can just forget it. I'm going over it here. So we wanted the wheel to show that at the base, we want to be sure that as we are having conversations with our staff, our first level of understanding around being culturally responsive is self-awareness. And so this is what helps us get there as a tool. So wanted you to have that. The second piece we wanted to be sure you were aware of is now the final version of our portrait of a culturally responsive educator, staff, and leaders. So we have done our job of getting feedback from 231 staff members over the course of the month of January, and then our regular meetings with our DEI committee, advisory committee members, which are 43 staff persons representing a cross-functional mix of district personnel. So we have come to what we believe are a good representation of a culturally responsive person in our district, with the mindsets of being empathetic, respectful, optimistic, creative, community-oriented, and adaptable in the middle, and then the 4 boxes representing the skills. So I want to give you a moment to just, put your eyes on that, ask us any questions that you might have about these 2 tools that we use in our foundational equity training.
Mr. Chapman, I do have a question. How is the staff receiving this here? Because I know this is work that is trying to help them become better educators, but how are they accepting this here? Are they receptive to it or not?
Well, during our sessions, our time together is very reflective, very interactive, and lots of communication. Reception for me would mean how I take it and use it, which is another question, right? And so now it becomes important for us to ensure that our leaders, as instructional leaders and coaches in the district, also understand this, know how to use it, and tie it back to how we support and provide professional development, and also evaluate. You'll recall several months back in our equity committee, we showed a crosswalk to these skills, from these skills to the Ohio teacher evaluation system, to the Ohio principal evaluation system. So we're not out of line for what is expected of our staff and anyone in our district, because this was co-created by folks from all positions. Wilma, you could speak to some of the sessions you've held in terms of response, if you have anything else to add to that.
Yes, along with what Carla has said, we've had several sessions where input was given, and
You can pull it to me. Yeah, there you go.
and the responses were they were pretty good. I mean, we came back to the table, we looked at and shared the information that was given to us, and then this is how we cultivated this portrait. So
now, I will tell you that our next level work then becomes how we realize this as part of our blueprint for excellence. So it is threaded throughout the blueprint. This mindset, the skills that our staff, not Carla, not Wilma, not Erica, staff co-created this. So now, as we begin to implement the strategies, actions and strategies in the blueprint, we're looking at how this is operationalized. And let me give you an example. So next level work for me as a district leader would be to have the conversations with our human capital and our new position, talent development and organizational development, to identify the ways in which we look for this in our hiring, how our professional development works to help folks understand this and use it in their day-to-day practice, and then how we coach and support folks to become. Now, I can't honestly tell you this is a 100% adoption thing, right? We are looking to grow critical mass. Right? We recognize that it will be more difficult for some than others to receive this, to use this, to make it real in their everyday work. Our goal is to grow the collective. That's the goal, to grow the collective, because ultimately, someone asked Wilma and I just last week, well, how do you know this is effective? How do you know that it is going to improve achievement for our students, reduce absenteeism, improve behavior? And so how do we know that it won't is what someone challenged me to say. But there is a ton of research dating back to Latson-Billings, Gloria Latson-Billings at the University of Wisconsin, dating back to 1989 on the effectiveness of culturally responsive practices. So we know that when we create an environment that is safe, supportive, and welcoming, right, it is in this portrait. We know that when our instruction is relevant and rigorous, right, and we know that when we make learning relevant for our young people, which is what we, say about what we're doing in our college and career academy, that those things matter in terms of how students perceive school, engage in school, and are motivated to learn. So, any questions? What are you thinking? What are you wondering?
Okay, I think some of the question, you said people posited the question, like, how do you know that this is working? My question is not how did you know it will work, because we have tons of data that tells us this absolutely will work. Even if you take cultural responsive out of it, we have research that shows even if we go to psychology and Pavlov's dog, if we just show basic human needs being Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Basic human needs being met will bring about change. So we know this, and this really is talking about all that, just basic humanity, right? As I'm looking at this, everything that's said here, it will tell you this is what excellence looks like. And if you want to impact effective change in a classroom, this should be the pillars just naturally, organically. Because I guarantee, and I can stand on this, the kids say I stand on 10 toes down on your chest with this one, right? Is that I guarantee that you would have output. There's no way. And I mean, I can stand on that, and anyone challenge me, and I'll support it with data research. But more importantly, I can show you fruit. You can tell me you're an effective teacher, but your fruit should speak to that. So if you say that you're effective, or you're an instructional leader and you're effective, fruit, you will produce fruit. There's no way. Because if you're not producing fruit, then you may think that you're effective. I can say I'm an effective farmer and I grow oranges and I never have an orange tree. Right, Molnar? This is just the fact. So this is what my point is. I think about evaluation, and then I put my arrow, evaluation. How was it operationalized? And then I said, wait a minute, Carla, take it around the corner. How was it operationalized? How was it evaluated? And what is the accountability? As I process this in my head. And so with that being said, understanding the structure of our school system and understanding we have teachers, and the teachers have a certain level of rights, and we have unions. We have principals. Principals have a certain, they don't have this, the same type of agency, I want to say. It appears to me, can I just say that it appears to me that they don't have the same type of agency as a teacher with a union behind them. And to make sure that this is being done to fidelity. The accountability piece becomes vital. How is it able to be actuated, though, from the building level, central office level, to where, no, this is what is happening. And if this is not happening, and I'm speaking from a professional position as a school administrator, but I'm in a private Christian school, and I'm an at-will employer. And then you understand I'm saying something when I'm saying something. So if a teacher is not aligned with what we're doing, I have the freedom. You're not a good fit for what we're doing. I'm a Christian school. This is our foundation. This is what we're doing. And this is how you're impact. I can let a teacher go immediately. If I'm ineffective and my bosses feel, it's my accountability is sure, fast. It's like the art of war. It's quick. In our system and our structures and all these layers, to introduce something like this, when we have plenty of data showing our performance, there's no way around it. Data is strong, and numbers are absolute. Dr. Monar can speak to this when we talk about numbers are absolute, period. One school, we just talked about this in instructional policy. We have data that can prove certain clusters thrive. If they've been in that cluster from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, that cluster, before the intersection and influx of transferees into this cluster, when this is your school, if you started this elementary, you go to this middle school and this high school. We have the research in this district that those students they read 1 to 2 grade levels above in that cluster, traditionally. We know what the research tells us about when you're reading at or above grade level, what that means for your success. And then we see the clusters that say something different. What I'm saying with all this talk is, Dr. Chapman, wonderful work. How is it being actualized in our buildings? How can we hold accountability in our buildings without seeming like, I'm not talking about throwing nothing over our head or bullying anyone, but I'm talking about in a very solid way.
Yeah.
And before you, I kind of want to, we're on like the same mind wavelength here and in the last meeting too, but I wanted to applaud you first and your team, because this is seminal work. We need to pause and appreciate this work that you and your team have accomplished already. And now that we've given that moment, what are we going to do with it? Right? This is the theoretical framework. This is your theoretical framework. And so now, I understand this is evolving. That's exciting that it's evolving. But as we have this framework and we have our blueprint and we have our data, how are we telling this story? How? So if you could tell us your plans for that story, our story, our district story, because this is huge.
Yeah, so, one of the ways we tell the story is to be in front of other professionals in other places and spaces, which we were on Saturday at Mount Union, sharing this work with other educators in the field. And so we do a lot of that. But internally, and I know, and Dr. Robinson, I might just ask you to also share, internally, what you'll hear me talk about a lot as it relates to doing equity work is how we address the way the systems within our system operate. And so we have a system of evaluation. We have systems of hiring and onboarding people. We have systems of evaluation, systems of coaching, systems of providing curriculum. And so equity work, this is wonderful, and I love it, and I call it my body of work, right? But we have to also be addressing the way the systems within our district work. And that has to be a part of what superintendent is addressing and what he is recognizing in terms of the restructuring and reorganization.
Got to dismantle some systems. That's
Thank
what
you,
needs to happen.
Dr. Chapman.
Disrupt them.
So for the system, Dr. Chapman's position, I would have asked for a equity officer if we didn't have one, because it's necessary for us to have this work in the district. And her role is not changing, but her role is actually going to what she should be doing in the district. And so you're going to see her in places and spaces that we're not accustomed to maybe seeing her in the district. So when it comes to human capital and positions within the district, which the repurposed position that Ms. Angela Carter had and still is kind of working in, but that position is going to deal with recruitment. And that's one of the aspects of that position. But Dr. Chapman is going to be sitting in on some of these interviews and being a part of that to ensure that we are equitably bringing in and conducting those interviews in such a way that we may not be accustomed to doing. because it is important for our equity officer to ensure that equity is flowing through everything that we do, which in the blueprint, you will see the dome on top of the coherence framework. That dome represents the equity and engulfs everything that we do. And so, and I've shared this with the team as well, that she will be meeting with division leads and department leads periodically, and more often than some in other areas, depending upon the need, to ensure that we are equitably working, even when we work through the budget, all of this stuff. She's going to be a part of that, because it's important for us to ensure that we are being equitable in everything that we do. And that was one of the things that when we did the blueprint that the board asked for. But I just think it's just common best practice that we do have that equity officer who is flowing through every aspect of whatever we do, every decision that we're making, to ensure that we are utilizing the core of our blueprint and making sure that we are being equitable in everything that we're doing. And for some people, that's going to be new because they're not used to her or her position that she's in actually being a part of everything. But when we wrote the blueprint, the thing that I charged her with was making sure that she worked with each one of those cornerstones to ensure that equity flowed through all of it. Equity just can't be a word, because some say, well, can we just stick a word? No, it's not a word. It's an action. It's who we are. And the more that we do this, it's going to become more of our culture in our district. And so it's who we're going to be, who we are, who we will become as time progresses.
Yeah. Thank you. And
I want to let you finish whatever you're about to say, because I have a question on top about the actual work. Because not the work. I don't question the work. Just it happened. The realization of the work from a level of accountability, because when there's resistance, anytime that there is change, anytime something begins to change in the system, you're going to have resistance. And with change, we know, we had the research that says it's going to be resistance, and that's okay, because it's not always bad to have that, right? Because it helps you work out some kinks. And superintendent and many around, I know you've been in your fields a very long time and in education longer than me. I've been in education only 20 years. And within my 20 years, I spent 7 years in the classroom, and the remainder has been as administrator. I've done so many professional development. We go to the same PD as Akron, as the public school system. I do the trainings, great trainings, excellent trainings. I've done excellent in-services. And then I observe classrooms, and it's not being implemented. And I think if you use this strategy, they went over this classroom management. How don't you get it? Every year we have classroom management. Why is it a disconnect for you? Follow the blueprint. We have the trainings. So I'm coming just from a very realist point of view, because this is great work. I'm trying not to use my urban vernacular and say dope. Like, this is really, really good work. I'm just saying, I want to have a real I don't want to have just a cute meeting. I'm in education. I'm around teachers. I'm a teacher. I see excellent teachers, even in this district. And I'm going to say from my personal experience, when it's not being executed, or when there's so much resistance, or if it's certain buildings where we see it, and I believe we will be able to measure and know that. What is the action step?
So, well, thank you, because I live with the frustration, right? I wear it on my back. They tell me I don't have a poker face. I wear it on my face, right? So one of the ways I think accountability has to occur with this work is in the use of data. And I'm not talking about student data. We have much scholar data. I'm not sure we have enough adult data. right? I'm not sure we are auditing and truly effectively looking at individual practice and, making it a regular, systematic part of the way we coach and support people, tracking it, documenting it, and using it to.
Because absolutely, the reason why, not to interrupt for Rube, but for clarity, because I asked and I posed this exact question and was told, and so this is a perfect meeting to address this, that such data legally cannot be obtained, that we cannot assess and evaluate such data. Can anyone speak to that? That is something, like you cannot specifically, Dr. Chapman, to give you this example, because I am 1,000% in agreement with you, and I don't know how the work can be done effectively without getting this data, that I said, Pastor Harrison, who's in the audience, who came here when I was first became a board member, he talked about those numbers about the 1 to 6 rate. Well, he said 1 to 5 is 1 to 6 ratio of disparity of which African American students were being disciplined. I'm going to use this for an example. Is that all right? And I said, well, this will be simple because every teacher, if I'm a Caucasian teacher and I'm working in a building and 99% of that population is black or brown, any referral, I can write 3 referrals and it can seem like I'm a racist if you're just looking at the data on my office referrals, right? However, if I'm in a school and you're looking over the way in which I'm doing these write-ups and the wording that I'm using that I know are buzz and trigger words that results in Board of Education referrals or expulsion, now you can see a trend of a pattern of me as an individual person, regardless of my color, of how, I'm going to use this word for lack of better words, I may be railroading kids or systematically targeting certain children to have them removed or expelled. If I'm a teacher that's always using language that is of a legal matter that results in students receiving legal problems as a result, if I'm always assaulted, things like that, that you can tell building by building and teacher by teacher. And the response I received was, oh, you will not, if you pull that type of information, it's something contractually where you cannot pull individual information on a teacher to extrapolate it down to this is the building's, this cluster of individuals is this building's problem. So I was told that. And so I'm going to put that out there if that's not a...
I don't know which particular data sets that is in reference to, but I am thinking about the systems that we have in place which collect data. So I'm thinking about our PACE process where we're going throughout the district. You're familiar with PACE, observing teacher practice, principal practice, school practice. That's data. I'm looking at our school improvement process where lots of data on student performance is shared. I'm looking at our attendance data. I'm looking at the collaborative planning data that superintendent wants to put in place. So all of these systems that are operating, our suspension data through our student services office. So all of these systems have their own sources of data. What I would like to see is how we're using all of it then to determine where hot spots are, right? There was at one point in time, and I'm not sure if you were here, Ms. Jackson, I know our other 2 board members and Mr. Alexander was here. We had something called an equity data dashboard. And it sliced and diced all of the data that we already collect in our district. It's not new data. It's data we already collect. And it sliced it and diced it by school, by grade, by zip code, by race, by subject matter. And so we could look at where those hot spots were and how each of those data sets combine together in ways for certain groups of students. Now, I know we're in the process of recreating that. because we have a new data system. But we are a storehouse of data. School districts are. In fact, we're so much about data that everybody else wants our data, right? We're surveying students, we're surveying parents, we're surveying staff. The Office of Student Services collects data on discipline, on attendance is tracked every day. Teacher evaluations, that's data. And so I'm not sure how we're all using the data in a comprehensive way to look at the big picture of what's working well and what's not. And we have these conversations often. There's a new process that has been implemented by the superintendent this year called the Principals Data Review. And so those have been powerful because principals can come and they can share from their own lens, their own school, in their own buildings, and identify what those needs are, right? So now it's our job to take that and to say, okay, let's put it all on the board and look at where there were some commonalities in some of the needs that were requested by buildings. Where are the gaps? I just asked someone whom I know will be doing some deep level work, deep data dive in the district. What is the profile of a highly functioning school? What is that? I have a profile of an adult that we want to see. What is the profile of a highly functioning school? And so when we start asking those level of questions, those deep data dive questions, that's equity work. That's equity work. Equity work goes below the surface and gets at those deep discussions on data and information.
Dr. Chapman, I'm just going to comment on some of this too, because when we first brought this equity work to the district, I think most people had no idea what equity was. They didn't know what it meant, and they didn't understand there was going to be a deep dive into a lot of areas that we probably wouldn't even think that equity will be part of equity, but it is, and that's the whole purpose, because that's how you get to a point where you make your school system, your district, your students, your professional staff better. Because I got teased about this years ago, and you probably I always said I want to be the best school district in the country. And so my idea is shoot for the moon. If you don't get to the moon, you're still amongst the stars, you're still there. So that was the whole point. We need to make sure that we're digging into data and all this to find out where we're at, even where our weak spots are. But that's not to criticize anybody. That's to come up and say, what can we do to help you so you can become better as a teacher, as a student, as a bus driver, as a principal, as a counselor, whatever position it may be. Yeah. I think that's the most important work that we need to do, because equity is not new. I'm an old man considered to everybody here, but this stuff, equity, has been going when I was a kid. You know, this was all the work they did. It wasn't called equity, but it was going on. And this is some of the work that we got that somehow got lost in the vacuum as education started to evolve, because this was the work that they wanted to have. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that we're doing this. And I'm proud that Dr. Chapman is here, and that's what we wanted her to be when we brought this here to the district, and she's doing the job that we wanted to happen. And so we applaud her. And I think if I was any staff person at this school or anywhere, and you have some type of system like this here, I would want to know and understand it, because I would want to better myself as an individual, and hope that my colleagues will want to improve themselves, so we can get the work that we need to do, which is the bottom line, making sure that our scholars, our students, get what they need so they can be successful and they can move forward. And when that happens, the whole district moves forward, and then you reap the benefits of your work. You know, but if you don't do it, you get nothing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk loud, talk more than I normally do, but that was just something I thought needed to happen. Let's move on. Dr. Chapman, I'm sorry.
Well, no. Anybody, anything else? I was going to say, you asked what is next. What is next is also.
The data, now what? So what are the action? I want to get to, because like you said, we have all this data. Mm-hmm. We have the discipline data. When I'm saying down to the person, it's like if I have a leaky ceiling, or this is a better example. What's the other type of heater other than a furnace, the old school heat that gives you the steam heat? What is that called? Broiler, right? Okay, very challenging to find people to work on boilers systems now. And the issue is if you have an old building and the boiler system is, they can't pinpoint if you got the pipes all through the walls of that old building. It's more cost effective in some cases. They say just take the whole thing out, replace it. Because you would have to buzz, because however they did it, they didn't do it correctly, we don't know where the leak is at. So now this room is freezing and this room is on fire. This is my point. I'm going to land the plane. When I'm talking about data and dealing with the data and how the data I'm talking about impacts culture and climate of a building, which then impacts learning, I'm talking about getting down to those busted pipes that everyone know is linking and spewing out and causing ineffectiveness of the flow of heat. So I'm saying where it gets down to the individual, Dr. Robinson, that if it's Carla Jackson, that I have to look Dr. Chapman in the face, and she says, look here. I understand you've been at this wherever, whether I'm an administrator, whatever my role is, for 20 years. This here, this receipt, as the kids say, receipt. Carla, it is Jackson, it is you. And you are not a fit for where we're going. So now we can start breaking those systems that are stopping the movement. I'm talking about while I'm yet here and while it's yet still day, Mr. Alexander, to start doing the work, moving this stuff around, because you can't have a blueprint for excellence like you have and put that type of work in it and create this type of stuff in the spirit of excellence, and we don't get to put some legs and some motion on it to where it is real. It's not just paperwork, and the new administration come and bury it like ain't none of this existed. This great work that we trying to do for the people.
So
That's all.
So the next level of work for us, is, which is why we're trying to move into, which we will be moving into, DataWise, because that's what DataWise does. It gets down into the cracks and crevices of the issues. And that's where we really begin to do those deep data dives, which this is where we're moving towards. This is what we're moving towards, where we will be able to, which is why we are putting in the MTSS model. And with that model, they will have specialists that will be working in each of the clusters, and that's the work that they will be doing.
Now, are we, and I want Dr. Chapman, you guys who in the trenches with this work, I guess my question, Dr. Robinson, also, are we empowered to really do what needs to be done with this work? Are we empowered? And if not, we can reflect. This can be another discussion. Then how do we need to strategize, and how do we become lock and loaded that when we do shoot, oh, this is what's happening and we're ready?
So I think that we are in the right place right now for that work to happen. And when the MTSS, the multi-tier system of supports model, is rolled out, I think that you will see the evidence of how that is going to be captured. And the work that those specialists are going to be doing, because exactly what you're saying is exactly what they're going to be doing. Okay. And we will begin to narrow things down to specific schools, specific classrooms, specific students, so that the real work now begins. Because it's not enough to collect data. We do an awesome job of that across the United States in all of our school districts, collecting data. Now the action happens, and this is where, when you get into steps 6, 7, and 8 of the DataWise process, this is where you begin to really dig. Well, you start in step 3 of digging into in step 2, digging into the data and understanding the data, right? And your data sets are in come in diverse means. But it's in steps 6, 7, and 8, which is where we now begin to do exactly what you're saying now. We begin to dig deep into the data. We begin to start narrowing the data down in specificity. If we want to know in a particular building who are those students that continuously keep coming to the office? Where is their, how, what does that data look like? That's what those specialists are going to be delving into, that data. If we're talking about attendance, same thing with attendance. And now what becomes our level of execution around when we do look at attendance, who need to be receiving letters at 3 days, at 5 days, at 7 days, at 9 days, because we shouldn't even get to 10 days with a student and we haven't been to court. So at what point do we stop the process to say we're now referring this kid and parent to court? Because you've missed 10 days, you've missed 20 days. There's no reason that a kid should miss that many days of school, and there has never been a court visit. Is that our aim? No, but that's the reality. You got to see the action with the data. So when we just keep collecting data and we just keep sending letters home, well, we're not necessarily fixing those pipes. We just keep putting a Band-Aid over those pipes. We just keep taping the pipes, but we're not necessarily addressing the real needs. But if people know and understand from the beginning, so in step one of DataWise is where we build for collaborative work. And that's where we begin to work with our parents, we begin to work with our community, we work with our judicial system on the things that we're gonna need in order for us to make sure that the outcome is this kid's attendance improves, this child's academic performance improves, that this kid's discipline improves. So how do we do that? Yeah, we do it through the measures of PBIS, restorative practices, SEL, social emotional learning. But we get down to the real reason why this child, it's not just enough to suspend them out of school.
Or to say
We really need to figure out why is he not coming to school, right? And then we work with those families, because whatever those needs are, that's when we find that out. As we delve into the data. You've missed 3 days.
Is for, right?
Yes.
The community, because if sometimes a child may be missing 20 days.
Yes.
It means we talked to Project Rise. There's all type of reasons why a child.
Right.
might miss
I'm not just missing days of school because I just don't feel like being here.
Yeah, so like
There's but now
we
the
really got
implementation part, the execution part is us looking into why, because it may not be that the child needs to go to court. Right, because we could have worked some things out that before it ever got to that point, whatever those needs are, and that's the work that we're trying to do with revamping student services for next year, and we use the term wraparound services very loosely, but I don't think that sometimes we actually understand what wraparound services really means, and it doesn't mean going from in DataWise, you don't go from 0 to 100, right? Which is the ladder of inference. This child is not coming to school. He doesn't care about school. His mama don't care about school. See, we jump to the ladder of inference already, and we're already saying the negative. But in essence, if we had begun that work at ground zero with this kid, we would have realized he didn't have a mom. He's basically living with a relative and raising him or herself. What supports do we need to put in place for this child so that kid can be successful? And that's where those wraparound services come. So it is a lot of work that the team is working on right now in preparation for the new school year, because I'm just getting here. So this is a lot of discovery, but I think that the discovery is coming at a great time along with the execution of what we're trying to put in place, that I think in the end we will see fewer kids, we won't have to talk about court, because we will have caught that around that third or that fifth absence. We wouldn't have to talk about, suspensions, because guess what? We've addressed that the first time you came to the office. We realized, because we use social emotional learn SEL, but we realized that this kid had needs that we were able to meet. So one of the things that I'm going to be also doing very shortly is meeting with our social services within our community, because I need to bring them in. They have to be a part of that SEL model. And so there are resources and supports that they can provide to us that will help us with that SEL model. So I'm excited about that work, but it's intense. But I think in the end, I think that we're going to really see the benefits of that. More kids coming to school and staying in school and getting to school on time. The academic piece, the social emotional piece, and the attendance piece.
Ms. Hall, she had her hand up. I'll let Dr. Chapman let you go.
So thank you for that, Dr. Robinson. I'm Dr. Chapman. So with these students that have these issues, right? So I'll be short. I was one of those kids in high school where my mother woke up one morning and couldn't walk, right? And no one knew what was going on with her. And I was a senior in high school, and I had a car and I could drive, but I had 4 younger siblings who had to get to school too. And at that time when my mother called the school to say, hey, Summer has to be maybe 10 minutes late to school every day to get her siblings to school. We didn't have this. I was told, no, you come late, you're going to be suspended, then you're going to be kicked out. And for the parents that don't have that person they can call on, such as my aunt at the time, Helen Arnold was alive, she was able to use her as a last resort, where she tried to go to the administration and say, hey, I need help. I can't walk. I don't know what's going on, but my kids need to go. And instead of them saying, okay, this is the plan. We'll do this. Summer, you got to be to school 10 minutes, afterwards. And they went to school on Hawkins, and I went to my school. And it wasn't that. So we had to take measures to a different level. But what if that parent doesn't know those different levels to talk to someone when that person is telling them, no, it can't be done, when we know it can? And it did happen for me. I was able to take my siblings to school, and my first period was an office worker, so I don't understand why it was such a big deal, But people are people. So it worked out for me, but it doesn't work out for all. And some of our children are the parent, sometimes in the household. How do they get to articulate to that adult why I'm late? Because let's be frank, some adults aren't trying to listen to what kids have to say. Why are you late? Why? Now it's repetition. And now the kid's like, I'm going to lose anyways. Why even go to school? So how do we work around that and, listen to every story? Some kids might come to school late just because they want to, but the vast majority is coming late for a reason. How do we work around, and how do we listen to each story before we make our own predictions as adults?
So let me, and you want a real conversation?
We have a real conversation.
Listen, we have to grow, bring in, and retain and support people who are this. And so when our instructional leaders and our principals are this, then they expect it of their staff. And so you can't trump bad hires. You can't, right? We can put supports in place, another system to put in place to address the needs of our families. Family and community engagement is part of comprehensive educational equity. It's one of the layers that we have to address. We know we're addressing it with family resource centers. We're addressing it by adding additional family liaisons into buildings. Not enough, not full-time yet. Right? Still have gaps in their service and capability to connect with families. But my point is, at the macro level, when we hire for this, then we don't get that, right? Because you have folks who understand the needs of our scholars, understand the issues of our families, and when you don't have this, you get that. Right. So I started my career in the district as a family services specialist. I was the person who dealt with that situation. But when you don't have leaders and staff in schools who really understand this and who are this, then you get that kind of response. And so we have to do more as a system to develop better people, capable people, skilled people, empathetic, adaptable, community-oriented people. Right? And so next for me is, how do we work with human capital to say, all right, we have some interviews coming up. How do we ask the questions that get at the competencies we want for our people? Now, where folks get the response that you're talking about, there needs to be another system of accountability for that. Right? But if we're not growing our leaders to coach for this, look for this, hire for this, evaluate for this, we get what you just said.
And just one more thing to piggyback on that. So by implementing this, which is amazing, do we go back and look at some of those students that have been kicked out of school or maybe sent other places because of having situations like this but was never heard? So do we open, I don't want to say that can of worm, but it is, go back and look at records. Why is this kid out of this school? Oh, it's because he was late all the time or she was late all the time? Well, what was the reason? And then how do we change that norm? Because that kid could be in 11th grade right now, and we have this new system. Now they're looking like, I tried to tell, but I'm stuck here now. Do we look at that situation for that child that may bring it to our attention, that may not bring it to our attention, and say, let's give you another shot?
Yeah. So those are the micro level kinds of work, day-to-day operational things that need to be happening. I am interested in, what is our system for ensuring that students who are absent frequently are provided the opportunity, right, to get in contact with somebody who will support their needs? Right? That day-to-day interaction, that's another system of attendance monitoring, right, that we need to have in place. But again, it wouldn't be as much of a problem, perhaps, when our people are fully embracing this. But those kinds of day-to-day, how do we follow up on absence? How do we address a student who is exiting our district? What kind of marketing strategies and outreach strategies do we have to bring students back? The MTSS model that will help students better connect to their needs. Those are all the kinds of things we need to have in place. But that day-to-day interaction that you're talking about is on the micro level. I am talking about, how do we design and create a system where that can't exist, because we're doing it well. Now, we're not there yet, but we, individual folks every day are doing what you're saying. I just heard 2 weeks ago about a school who is making calls to a charter school because they knew some of the young people who left. They were their children, and they were calling them to get them back and to find out what they can do to serve them. Those are great actions that individuals can take, but our work has to be on creating the right system that wouldn't allow that to happen in the first place.
I think, which is something that I said to the board during my interview, which I still believe in, and even now. We cannot continue to keep doing education the way that we have always done it and expecting to get different results. And we have to look at our practices. We have to look at our systems. We got to look at our structures. So if you go back to the blueprint, you will see in the coherence framework that we have systems and structures within that framework that help to build that accountability. We didn't get here overnight, but I'm surely trying to get us from where we are overnight. I guess that's a joke, but I'm serious. But it has to happen fast because we're fastly losing kids, whether they're leaving the district or they have just checked out and they come to school every day or whenever they can or whatever the situation might be. And so it's, this is the hard part, putting systems and structures and things in place. But we have to do this piece first and do it well so that the implementation of the efforts of what we're doing, we can see the fruits of the labor.
Yeah.
So there are things that I'm, going to be proposing in the budget that will be piloted, Ms. Hall. But, I'm looking at the data, but I'm also looking at the district. And I'm in tune to what's happening across this district. I was very in tune to that when I interviewed. It just was validated once I got in and really could see things. And and this is 6 months. It's taken me that much time to really see a lot of things, but some things I saw immediately. We have great bones and structures here. We're building on that to put those systems in place so that we can do. But again, to the point that Dr. Chapman made, when we're interviewing, which is why she will be sitting on interview teams, we have to ensure that the people that we're bringing into this district now, that they fit into what we want as a community and as a district. We have to make sure that people are the right fit. And we have to make sure that they understand that the urban inner city kid, right, that comes from all different walks of life, from dual parent home or single parent home where they make this amount or they have this income, to the dual parent, single parent home where it's this. The wide spectrum, no matter if they come from the south, east, north, or the west of this city. Do you understand who we have that we want educated? And so I think that, again, the soil is fertile. We're in a good place right now, even though it may not seem that way, but we're in a good place right now where I think we're going to begin to see the fruits of some of these systems being put in place. And for some people, they will welcome it. For others, they need a little bit more time to get on board. And for some, you're never going to get them on board. And those are the people that we either have to support them, which we can do, so that they can get on board, or we support them as they find other places, because that's not our goal. We want to keep people and grow people. And that's why we're looking at leadership and self-deception as a systemic cultural influencer and changer in the work that we're doing. But this stuff is going to take us at least 2 to 3, 4 years to get it all in place and to really begin to see the fruits of the labor. But the beauty is that we're moving in the right direction, and we will get there.
Dr. Molnar, go ahead. I'll let you go.
I think, especially in light of the 2 to 3 years, I kind of want to come back to the telling of the story. And yes, we're presenting, and we are being leaders of, but as we gather our receipts, as we get our data, it's January right now. I'm collecting receipts. I'm doing metaphors now too. I'm collecting my receipts and I submit them to my insurance company, but the receipts alone separately, that data alone separately, isn't enough of a story. I have to gather them and submit that story. And as we have our lens here for the story, and as you talk about our portrait, and as this continues to evolve, as we have years here, and the portrait of the high effective building, these are chapters to a book. These are vignettes in a series. And this is so exciting. And do we need any more resources in order to capture that story? So that way, in a year and a half, if someone says, how long have we been doing this? What have we done? We can say, here you go. Or do we have here people telling this story, this process?
Start with the disenfranchised. So when we start with that, from that point of the story, because you're talking about telling a story, this is a story to be told, right? And so the story gonna start off with a dark chapter, I think. And then to your point, the growth to see, because that's the story as I see it, Molnar. Because the fruits are in when I walk outside. When I hit the corner, like if I'm coming down Main and I go up through Grant Street. So I'm gonna let Dr. Chapman finish on that. But when you tell a story, I love the analogy, but it's a real story. And it's not gonna start off with bubble gum and popcorn and pretty stuff. It's gonna be dark to light to be able to tell the story and tell it from an accurate lens. I like how you gave the example of the 3, like if it's 3 years worth of work. And not to be disparaging, but to be truthful. Because I know some people get a lot of flack when you start from the dark point, but we're just starting, and if I'm understanding what this equity work needs to be in order to fully support you all in the efforts of execution. And I stand for correction at any time, because I'm just one person that's processing this out loud, that's a part of this community, and what I understand as an auntie, in this community, and what happened with my nephews coming through, I'm coming at it from that lens of what happened. Like, you were a straight A student in elementary. Well, like, what happened? And this, when I talked to my one nephew, this didn't happen.
Yes.
Along the line somewhere.
And those stories are critical, but I was trying to refer to the
Bubblegum.
The larger story of this did not accidentally happen. This is thoughtful. This is intentional. You are doing work to break down these systems, and if you're doing the work all of the time, we can't stop to forget to tell the story of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, Mrs. Molnar, but I can tell you that part of that story is deeply understanding what we know about how our system is experienced by our families, our students, and our staff. And from that, what we need to know about how to improve it. So we get to this, but part of, to Mrs. Hall's point, what do we need to know about the way folks are experiencing our system? That's where all of this began. And once we felt we had a firm grasp on that, based on our data, right, what do we need to know to improve it? And then how do we grow ownership of this? So right now I'm coaching principals to use this with their staff and not say, here, Ms. Jackson, go be culturally responsive. Not that way, but to say, how can you use this in your day-to-day practice? What would it look like for you in your classroom with your scholars to incorporate these things? How are you? That is right now happening. We're seeking that feedback from principals through their staff right now. right now. And so that is going to help us then paint an even clearer picture about how it is operationalized now. Now we can say to principals across the district, here's what staff have said to us about what this looks like in their day-to-day practice. This is what you can now coach for, look for, support for. And so it is a story, but I like to say it's a journey. It's a journey, and it goes like this. There's not a straight path because this is adaptive work. We learn and do. I tell Mrs. Alexander all the time, we're learning and doing. We're learning and doing, and then we get to a place where enough people have said, 1,600 have said, this is it. Right, statistically reliable, valid, right, and so the work is evolving. It's adaptive. It's a journey. There's a story in it, but I have to always be thinking about how to grow ownership. And right now, it's in the hands of principals to work with their staff, being coached by me and Mrs. Alexander and some others in how to help staff understand what it looks like.
I think that's the process you need. It's always a process that has to happen. This is the process you're using. I think that process does begin with the principals because they are I call them the CEOs of their school, and they need to make sure that happens. And then it trickles down to the teachers and hopefully to our kids so they get what they need. I want to make sure we still on track, or we have other things
we have just a couple of updates. I just wanted to share that, our equity committee updates is what we provide you for sharing at your board meetings. Wilma, you have a couple of things to share, and then most of it we've already kind of talked about.
Yes. So if you would flip over the sheet that was passed out to you, there's information on there where it starts with the CHAMPS training. As a learning specialist, this is part of what I do. I actually was doing CHAMPS for a number of years here in the district, and as Mr. Alexander stated early, equity work has been being done, but it just wasn't called that. And so one of the things that CHAMPS is big on is making sure that students have what they need, the resources and the tools that they need in the classroom from the teachers. And so if you look at the handout, that multicolored handout that has the CHAMPS acronym on it, it explains what CHAMPS is all about. And I start every year out working with the new teachers that come in to get them grounded in this framework of CHAMPS. And basically what it is classroom management. And in this part of classroom management, they get all the tools and resources that they need, basically, to start day one working with students that need supports. And so as you can see here in the information that I provided, since October, I've PD'd 48 teachers in the district. And you can see there in the box there, they're from all grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And those are the schools listed of the teachers that were present. And not only that, we had another DEI advisory committee meeting on December 13th. And we looked at 3 new training models that were developed by the members there. And the sessions that we had, we explored privilege, redlining, and DEI in the workplace. And they're actually going to use those in future sessions. They came up with their own lessons. And they also were a part of reviewing the Blueprint for Excellence. So if you take a look at that CHAMPS handout, what it does is it's just showing that that it helps our teachers learn exactly how to pay attention to what's happening with their students in the classroom. So just for example, the C in CHAMPS stands for conversation. Students need to know how they can talk to one another. If they can, with whom can they talk to? How can they talk to? How loud? And so right across from that is what is called their voice or speaking levels. Teachers daily let them know what level they're allowed to speak in the classroom, how loud, and how long. So basically, this is just another blueprint to help teachers know what they should be doing with their teachers, because they can't be the only ones talking in the classroom all the time. And so they need to share that space, and kids know that with this process, and it's K through 12, all can use it, all have been using it. And with those teachers, this lessens the referrals to the office for disruptions in the classroom. The attendance is more improved, and we have data to show that the teachers that do take this and actually utilize it in the classroom, they do have less classroom referrals, because they're actually having conversations with their students and asking the whys, as to if they're not there today, why weren't you here? So it's a nice way to be able to communicate with their students and to actually know them, get to know them, and build those relationships.
We want to talk just briefly about the next level work, the crosswalk to culturally responsive practices and champs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you take a look at each corner that's in that handout that you have, and so that's actually what I've been working on all year, is how this connects with the CHAMPS process. So in there, it builds their social skills in the classroom. The real world skills is connected to this. And if you look at those bullet points that are in each of those categories, the personal skills, they really, really build on that. A lot of what you see there is definitely tools that teachers use to really connect with students in the CHAMPS process. So it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, do this, do this, do this. It's actually a process that they could look at and pull things out of that's fitting for their individual classrooms. So it's not a canned process. It's a process that they can implement any time of the year, no matter what time of the year they start. It's nice to start in the beginning to have that foundation, but if teachers get hired all types of times throughout the school year, so they can get this process at any time. And in the teaching, learning, and development skills, it is very vital that these things happen with the students there, and that's where that connection comes with the CHAMPS process.
So I wanted her to speak to the crosswalk between CHAMPS and culturally responsive educators, staff, and leaders, because we aren't doing anything out of this division that doesn't align to this. So everything we do has to source back to what we're saying we want people to be. We have to be. And so that, we're pushing in that way.
Yes.
To move our own work and to have our own work rooted in that. So, yes, you can. Yes, you can. So,
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I know I was looking at this and reading along and things like that, and when we get into movement and the elementary side, kids are kids. I mean, I sit here and wiggle my chair and, all of that stuff. We're asking them to sit down for a long period of time. And I know at my daughter's school, I sat down in a chair and I went backwards. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And they said, oh, those are chairs that move. So when you're feeling antsy and so that you're not disruptive to the class, you're able to move in your chair. It doesn't make any noise, but you just got to know it move, right? Do we do any of that in our schools? For our elementary, okay, because I haven't had a chance to visit all the schools yet, but I was always curious to wonder, does APS do that?
Yes.
The kids don't have to have issues or mental problems. They're just kids.
Right.
And being told to sit still for a long period of time, do we have different ways? Do we let our kids sit on the floor to maybe do a spelling test? Or, do we have the bouncy balls and things like that? So we already have that.
Yes, I can speak to that. I used to teach kindergarten and first grade, and then I went to middle school to teach middle school science. But even through that process, I had students in my classroom that needed to literally get up and do their work. They're standing up, but as long as they're not disrupting their neighbor in any kind of way whatsoever, they're still learning. But they're learning in their own comfort zone. And so, yes, I will let them stand up. I will let them go stand in the by the windowsill. They could take their work, their book, or whatever with them, as long as they're okay with it. And yes, that is happening in the district. Maybe not all teachers are allowing for for that, but I did. Even when I went to middle school, I still allowed for that because it's very hard to sit for 45 minutes and not be able to get up and move. And that's one of the reasons why that movement piece is in this CHAMPS process, because kids need to be able to move about in their own space in their classrooms. And so, and they have to be comfortable being able to do that. And so with the understanding, when teachers are professionally developed in this process, they get that, they understand it, and they allow for it to happen. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
So yes, it's across the board, but not everybody is
Not
open
everybody.
and willing to that. So do we see kids getting sent to the office because they're wiggly? Or do we
Refusing to sit.
see that? And when we see that, how can we address it with those teachers to say, well, what are you doing in your classroom when you have this first or second grader that, or 2 or 3 that are just wiggly, but they're learning. They're there.
Yeah.
They just can't sit. Instead of saying kids have a disability.
Yeah, it's like a
How
kid
do
that
we-
likes to tap their pencil. So you just tell them to turn it on the other end and use the eraser to tap. It's more quiet. So you make it adaptable for them. That's part of that thing that's in this.
Yeah.
Being able to be adaptable. So yes, we covered all of that, in this portrait of being culturally responsive. So hopefully moving forward, those teachers that are not on board right now will soon be on board.
I'm excited
and allow
about this,
for
and I
that.
can't wait till this is fully executed to
Yes.
see the difference in the transition for our students to learn
Yes.
in their comfort zone.
And that's being culturally responsive, understanding the way your students learn, right? That's a core tenet of being responsive. And, understanding that teachers come into the district at different levels, different abilities, different experiences, and so we have to coach and support regularly in ways that build skill for managing classrooms, because I call it the messy classroom, makes some folks nervous if kids aren't, sitting where they're supposed to sit. The messy classroom is the group over here doing something, kids sitting on the floor with their headphones on, another group over here working on a project. That takes an incredible amount of skill for a teacher to manage all the multiple ways that our young people learn. But we as a district, again, I'm going to go back to the system. What system do we have in place, Akron Public Schools, to support our teachers to be better at managing all those many learning styles? And that's the piece where we've got to figure out, what does that look like? What does that look like? Yeah.
One thing I do, I believe this is the piece right here to give to the CEO, the principal, so they can use this here with their staff, and once they use this, that'll be the trickle-down effect that will have the impact of the students. And one thing I always say, now in education, especially in elementary and middle school, and even in high school, you have to use a non-traditional way of teaching, because we have non-traditional kids. You don't have the traditional anymore. So the non-traditional way of teaching helps the kids. I don't know how many times in my job, when I talk to kids about school, I hear them talking about the teachers who allow them to do this or they can do that, and it's fun in their classrooms. They're like, man, they want to come to school because it's adapting to what their needs are and how they can learn and grow. So I think that's really good. I really like this too. I think this is a big piece that will be from the top down to make it a better.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
To learn.
Right. It's right. That's part of it.
I'm sorry for talking out of
Yeah.
turn.
No, that's part of it.
This is the big piece. For
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
not
yeah.
only the teachers, but they can educate the students, and the students can educate the teachers on how they fit in.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. So, coming in 2 weeks, we have a session with our ambassadors, students, and other representatives from buildings across the district that we are going to train to become trainers. So they will be delivering that information as part of adult learning. I think it's probably one of the most exciting things right now for me personally, because being culturally responsive is also about centering the scholars, the students' experiences. And so when they are able then to speak to this to adults. Right? I think we're really going to open some doors for folks who may need to hear it differently. And I think there's real power that is going to come from that. Dreama Whitfield is working with us on bringing forward a team of youth scholar DEI trainers. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you for saying that, because I forgot to mention that. So really don't have a lot. The superintendent talked about my engagement with every cornerstone and all leaders within the blueprint around their goals and their strategies, ensuring that equity is used as a lens as they're considering their work. And then most recently was even able to be a part of the architect interviews for facility options in our district, which was, a new thing for me to learn about how facilities are built. But really integrating the voice of equity in all work is the work. That is the threading. That is the comprehensive educational equity. So if you could just use this for your update at the board meeting, we'd appreciate it. And that's all we have, unless there are some questions we did want to ask about board meeting, Equity Committee meeting times. If the committee wanted to change times, look at new times.
I was going to kind of ask that question too. If and co-chair, I want to ask you too. Would you want to change, or would this time be good for you?
This time is fine.
It's fine. Okay, because I don't know if some might want.
5:30.
Yeah, it starts at 5:30. Because I was going to try to push it up a little 5.
You providing lunch? Oh, well, 5:30. No, I'm joking.
We don't have a budget for that.
Yeah. Well, okay, I was going to, say maybe 5 o'clock. That would be a good time, but it'll be up to. I want to also ask the chair.
We have another meetings. I know we had a meeting at 4:30.
Because, my instructional policy is from 4:30 to 5:30.
Okay, so we'll stay at 5:30. That makes sense.
It's going to end every time at 5:30.
Well, we want to end it an hour or two.
Just so it's
No.
between like 5:20 and 5:30.
Right. We'll just leave it at 5:30 then, because if our meetings are on the same date, so it might as well leave it the way that it is. So I'm okay with that. You guys okay with that, Dr. Chapman, Ms. Alexander? Okay.
Or unless we don't
pleasure
have
of
the
the board.
instructional meeting,
Okay.
when we don't have it, unless it works, does it usually work like this? We have the instructional meeting,
Yeah,
and then the equity meeting
yeah.
is this.
Yes, no
Okay.
meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just leave it the way it is. Makes it simpler. It's okay.
I have one quick
Yes.
question. I'm sorry, Chair.
No.
Ms. Alexander, you talked about redlining when you were going through your spiel with with the children and with the teachers learning about the redlining. And in my job that I do, redlining is something that I was like, I need to really learn about it. And unfortunately, yes, they say redlining still doesn't exist, but it does, especially on your deed from way back when. And it's how, and that's something I'm trying to figure out, is how do we break the cycle? Because even though Summit Lake is a prime example, it's redlining all through that neighborhood. And a lot of people just want to get a loan to get a roof, but they're being denied from the banks without real reason. Hey, I retired. I have money in the bank. Why can't I get a loan? And it's other excuses, but, and it's important that we educate our kids and our families about the redlining, because when you break it down, there's a document. It's like 189 pages, and it breaks down every single neighborhood in Akron.
Yeah, we use it.
We use that in
our training.
And the verbiage at the bottom that talks about
Yeah, we got
blighted
it.
neighborhood or
We have it.
it.
Yeah, we use that.
But if you
as a
don't know
source
about the
document.
redlining,
Yeah.
it's like we need to educate our families about that.
Yeah. And that is what happened with our advisory committee. They learned about that red lighting here in Akron. as we went through last year's process for foundational training with them. So yeah, they've gained a better understanding of what it is, what it looked like, and what it sounded like.
Yes.
And Carla can speak.
I have a resource for you. We could talk about even how we've used a particular video resource to help people go deeper in their understanding.
Yeah, I would love to learn about that. But thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate being here. So thank you.
Dr. Molo, you have any questions?
No, but it's since my microphone is on. I will say one of my first conversations with you, I talked about wanting to remove barriers, and you said that we're running out of time and you're kicking down doors. That has stuck with me. And so in our board retreat, I gave a couple plugs to a legal policy committee. So now I'm going to steal your committee meeting to give a couple more plugs to my legal policy committee meeting, where we are discussing participation in committee meetings. And specifically in the Legal Policy Committee, we have restructured our agenda in order to provide opportunities for student board members or other people to participate in our policy process. So I wanted to present that to as
Inclusion at its best.
well. It's
Yeah.
it's this work that is making things happen. That is part of this. It did not happen on accident. It happened because of this work.
Thank you.
All right, well, Dr. Chapman, Ms. Alexander, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for the work that you're doing for the district. I do believe that before I leave this board, I will see the equity work being really implemented and seeing that our students get what they need, which is and sending our school district to the top, being the top school district in the country, because we can do that, and we have to believe it. If we don't believe it, then, it won't happen. So, all right, with that, any other questions we have? No other questions? All right, meeting adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry, Reverend Harrison.
And for your next meeting, we skipped over, I was listening, you skipped over the accountability piece and started talking about students and attendance going to court. But the piece where you hold staff accountable, that are not moving towards the work. With the work, you have your training, you kind of skipped over the piece. The work, and you can have the blueprint. But not everybody's doing it. You only got 5 stars, you only got 11 stars. So how do you hold staff, teachers, whomever accountable for not coming along with work?
Okay.
It's funny that he says that, because it was in my mind to say it. I thought I asked that question, but I guess it was so much exciting stuff, but that was like the big thing. I wrote it down, like, what is the accountability? So definitely we can talk about that. Give you a little bit more time to finalize it. So yeah, I'm fine with that the next board meeting.
And whenever you guys are ready, if you're ready the next meeting or meeting after that, whenever. All right, well, let's
Accountability is held in the way we hold folks to their performance. This information is located within our evaluations. It is a matter of holding people accountable to evaluate, to monitor, and support and intervene. The number one thing I have said to principals in my time with them is your job is to mitigate harm. From an equity lens, your job is to mitigate harm. Anytime harm occurs for a student, a family, as a principal, as a central office administrator, our job is to mitigate harm to the best of our ability. It's a simple answer. It's the systems are in place. We have to ensure that they're used.
And I'm glad you said that, because anywhere you go, in most jobs you have, people are held accountable. You're evaluated in most places every year, so that if you can do the job, if you can't do the job, if you can't do the job, then they say they'll give you opportunity to improve, or they give you tools to improve. But if you don't, then you might have to, ease on out. I say ease on down the road. You might have to ease on down the road. So that's something that's important.
And we start with support. Start with finding out what we need to know about where the skills are lacking, right? And then offer the type of support and intervention to hopefully get you there. Monitor that. Continue to look for progress. Document, right? Use the tools we have. That really, I mean, we have the tools. We have the tools. Yeah.
Reverend Harrison, does that answer your question? All right. Well, good question. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, I don't want to be fast, but if we don't have any other questions, we will adjourn.